In ancient Japan, a young boy lived in a small village temple. He was training to be a Zen monk, but the life was a grueling test of endurance. Every morning began at 3:45 to the sharp ring of a bell. For the rest of the day, he was expected to sit in the lotus position for hours, his back and legs aching until the pain became almost unbearable. He was required to memorize the Zazen Wasan, a chant explaining that all living beings come from Buddhas. This diagram illustrates the poem's core metaphor. Just as there is no ice without water, there are no Buddhas without living beings. Discipline was enforced through physical consequence. If the boy's focus slipped or his head began to nod from exhaustion, the old priest would strike him over the head with a heavy wooden spoon. He went through the motions of the monastery, but the boy and the temple were a total mismatch. He was attempting to walk a path that led further away from his actual nature. The moment the priest left him alone, the boy abandoned his chores. He reached for his wooden box, prepared his ink, and pressed his brush against the parchment. He drew cats. He filled pages with cats that were prowling, stretching, and yawning. There were ginger cats, tabbies with hair standing on end, and black cats curled on mats. When the priest returned to find the temple covered in ink, his reaction evolved from weary sighs to sharp scoldings, and finally to total despair. The priest eventually gave up. He told the boy he might have the makings of an artist, but he would never be a monk. He was told to leave the temple and seek his fortune elsewhere. As the boy packed his mat and ink, the priest offered one final cryptic warning. When it was time to sleep, he must always ensure the place was both small and safe. The boy was now an outcast, his only real talent having cost him his home and his future. He walked into the unknown with nothing but his brush. He walked all day until he reached a much larger, more famous temple. Exhausted and looking for shelter, he pushed open the heavy gates. The massive grounds were eerily silent. Despite the temple's size, the courtyard was empty, and the shrine was deserted, with only a single lamp left burning in the dark. As the boy looked around the shrine, his eyes landed on the massive, blank screens lining the walls. To him, they weren't just architectural features, they were an invitation. He worked through the night, his brush moving across the paper, until every single screen in the temple bore the image of a cat from his imagination. In this empty, lawless space, the boy had transformed a sacred monument into a massive gallery of his own obsession. When the work was done, the boy remembered the priest's advice. He found a small broom cupboard, crawled inside the cramped space, and fell fast asleep. At midnight, the silence broke. The boy was woken by the sound of heavy sniffing and the rhythmic scratching of claws against wood. The scratching turned into a violent commotion. Screeching filled the shrine as statues were knocked over and heavy wooden screens shattered onto the floor. The boy huddled in the back of the pitch-black cupboard, paralyzed. He stayed perfectly still, listening to the destruction and certain that he wouldn't survive the night. He was physically helpless, relying entirely on a tiny hiding spot while something incomprehensible tore the world apart outside the door. When the sun rose, the boy crept out of the cupboard to find the corpse of a monstrous goblin rat the size of a horse lying in the center of the room. This was the reason the temple had been deserted. The beast had claimed the shrine and driven the monks away. The boy turned to the screens he had painted, but the paper was now blank. Every one of his ink drawings had vanished. In their place were dozens of live cats, sitting peacefully in every corner of the temple. They were the same cats he had painted the night before, now flesh and blood. The boy left the temple and never again forced himself into a life of chanting. He spent the rest of his life as a famous artist, proving that his pen was every bit as powerful as a warrior's sword. The monastery had treated his talent as a distraction from the real work of a monk, but in the end, his survival didn't depend on the sutras he struggled to memorize. It depended on the one thing he couldn't help but do.